Hello, everyone. What a packed room we have here. Now, dear excellencies, ministers, distinguished guests, and valued members of the transport community, I want to welcome you all to the International Transport Forum Summit 2025 here in Leipzig. My name is Ariane Alcorta. I am an international journalist, and today I am also a moderator across global congresses and summits. Today, I have the extraordinary pleasure to welcome you all here and to guide you through this opening plenary where leaders, experts, and change makers from all corners of the world are coming together to shape the future of transport. Now, this forum has grown tremendously over the years. Today, we have over 1,000 members coming from over 80 countries. Now, the ITF Summit continues to be the world's leading platform for transport dialogue. And this year, we turn our attention to one of the most challenging questions of our time. How do we build a transport system that is not only resilient, but also inclusive and sustainable, all during the midst of global uncertainty? So that's why this year's theme is Transport Resilience to Global Shocks. And this is the first in the 2025-2027 Summit Trilogy on Transport Resilience. In 2026, we will focus on the financing resilient transport, and in 2027, we will focus on the governance aspect of it all. So whether it's climate disruption, cyber threats, pandemics, or geopolitical shifts, we will be looking at how transport can be transformed into a force for equity and long-term stability. This opening plenary sets the stage for that conversation. We will begin with a set of welcoming speeches that will be addressing or reflecting the diversity, ambition, and spirit of collaboration that really define this gathering. So let's begin. It is my honor to welcome the presidency of the 2025 ITF Summit, the nation that is at the forefront of sustainable mobility and regional integration. I am talking about Chile. So please help me give a very warm welcome to Chile and inviting to the stage the Minister of Transport and Communications, Juan Carlos Muñoz.
Thank you very much. I would like to start thanking our German hosts for hosting again and again this annual meeting here in Leipzig, and of course, thanking again Yang Tae Kim, the Secretary General of ITF, and in your name, everybody else from ITF that does a wonderful job in gathering us together here in Leipzig. To you, to Mary Kras, to all the team, thank you very, very much. It's an immense honor to welcome you today to the International Transport Forum Summit 2025 here in Leipzig. As Minister of Transport and Telecommunications of Chile and as President of the ITF, I'm deeply grateful to the opportunity to open this global gathering on behalf of all member countries. I would like to begin, as I said, by expressing our sincere appreciations to the ITF. This year's summit is convened under the theme Transport Resilience to Global Shocks. It's a timely and urgent subject, given the convergence of crises we have faced in recent years, from pandemics to natural disasters, cyber attacks, urban social unrest, to geopolitical tensions. These events have revealed the strengths and vulnerabilities in our transport systems, and they have also taught us something essential, that resilience is not only about recovery, it's about anticipation, preparation, and transformation. Chile, like many of your countries, has experienced the consequences of these shocks firsthand. Earthquakes, tsunamis, volcano eruptions, wildfires, floods, supply chain disruptions, and public health emergencies have all tested the robustness of our infrastructure and the responsiveness of our institutions, but they have also galvanized action. Through this action, Chile has developed a successful action plan to address these risks by listening to our scientists. Nobody would dare or be allowed in Chile to build infrastructure that ignores the scientific evidence organized around our construction manuals and regulation. Well, the risks posed by climate change cannot be addressed differently. So first, I want to emphasize that resilience and decarbonization must go hand in hand. The long-term threat posed by climate change must be at the center of our resilience strategies. Therefore, in Chile, we have made resilience a cornerstone of our national mobility strategy. This includes modernizing transport planning, improving climate risk assessments, and embedding adaptation criteria into infrastructure investment. We cannot ignore that transport is a major contributor to global greenhouse gas emissions, accounting for nearly 1/4 of CO2 emissions from energy use. It's clear, we will not meet the goals of the Paris Agreement unless we accelerate the transition to low-carbon transport systems. That is why Chile is promoting a call to action to countries in order to increase ambition in coming COP30 this year in Brazil, where we think it is possible to agree on some concrete indicators and goals from the transport sector. This call to action demands countries to commit in their NDCs about how much they plan to reduce energy consumption and what fraction of this energy will come from renewable sources. In Chile, we are advancing the decarbonization agenda through an integrated vision of sustainable mobility. We have adopted a national sustainable mobility strategy and a mitigation and adaptation plan in the transport sector. But we know this is not enough. That's why we're calling on all ITF members to go further together. Second, we must recognize that resilience is not just a technical concept. It's fundamentally social. A resilient transport system must be inclusive, equitable, and accessible to all, especially the most vulnerable. In Chile, we're working to improve public transport in Santiago, our capital city, where at the end of this year, 2 out of 3 buses of the 6,500 bus fleet will be electric. That's more than 4,300 electric buses in just one city. But also we're extending our metro and train networks and providing better public transport to underserved regions and rural areas. We believe that resilience requires making sure that in moments of crisis, no community is left behind. Third, resilience requires better governance and stronger institutions. We need more effective coordination across sectors and levels of government. We also need to ensure that infrastructure investments are guided by robust data, sound risk assessments, and inclusive consultation processes. Fourth, we need to mobilize innovation and partnerships. The private sector plays a vital role, not only in deploying technologies, but in helping governments deliver flexible, scalable, and sustainable solutions. Our electric bus program in Santiago, for example, is the result of a successful public-private collaboration involving bus operators, bus manufacturers, energy providers, and financial institutions. We must replicate and scale these kinds of alliances across all modes of transport and in all regions. Fifth, as a global community, we must build resilience through solidarity and cooperation. We face common challenges, but we also have shared tools and shared knowledge. This is especially true for Latin America and the Global South, where infrastructure gaps and exposure to climate risks make resilience an even greater imperative. Let this summit be a platform for dialogue and learning across regions where the experiences of one country can inspire action in another. Notice that the more specific a country's commitment to specific actions and targets, the more attractive this country becomes to attract climate financing. As part of our role as ITF presidency, Chile has led the preparation of 2 policy recommendations that we have submitted for the approval of the Council of Transport Ministers. The first one is focused on road safety, reaffirming our collective commitment to reduce road fatalities and outlining practical steps for improving safety across all modes of transport. This recommendation stresses the need for systemic approaches, data-driven policies, and shared accountability between stakeholders. The second one addresses the emerging challenges and opportunities posed by artificial intelligence in the transport sector. It provides a framework for the responsible and inclusive deployment of AI technologies, ensuring that innovation is aligned with public values and societal goals. We believe these two policy recommendations are both timely and essential. They reflect the priorities of our presidency and the broader vision of a resilient, sustainable, and equitable transport future. Finally, I want to return to the idea that resilience is a choice. It's a choice we make through the investments we prioritize, the policies we adopt, and the partnerships we forge. As president of the ITF, I've seen firsthand the value of multilateral dialogue. But now is the moment to move from dialogue to delivery. Let us use this summit not only to share ideas, but to shape commitments. Let us leave Leipzig with a renewed sense of urgency and a common purpose to build transport systems that can withstand the shocks of today and rise to the opportunities of tomorrow. On behalf of Chile, I thank you again for your presence, your commitment, and your vision. Let's make this summit a turning point in the global journey toward resilient and climate-compatible transport. Thank you very much.
So thank you so much to Chile, our 2025 Summit presidency. Now, I want you also to thank you for your inspiring leadership and warm welcome this year. To celebrate Chile's presence and culture, we have prepared a special surprise for you. We are talking about a dance presentation, the cueca, the national dance of Chile. And I want you to pay close attention because you're about to see three couples dancing in a slightly different way, each representing the way it is danced in different parts of Chile. So without further ado, please help me at welcoming the folkloric group Pasión Chilena to the stage. What a vibrant and heartfelt performance that was. And thank you again to Mr. Munoz for participating in here. I don't know about you, but I really enjoyed it. Now, we turn our attention now to our host country. It is my honor to welcome a key voice in shaping Europe's transport future. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Patrick Schniede, Federal Minister for Digital and Transport of Germany.
Lieber Generalsekretär,
Secretary General, dear Young Tae Kim, dear colleague Juan Carlos Munoz, and your fiery performance on stage,
liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen,
Ministers, vice ministers, state secretaries, dear colleagues, I would also like to welcome you to the ITF Summit 2025.
in Leipzig.
Welcome to Leipzig.
Als Verkehrsminister haben
As Minister for Transport, we have an important task.
und Lebensgrundlage vieler Menschen abhängen.
The quality of life and the means of earning a living of many people depend on our work. We bring together regions, countries, continents, companies, families, and friends. It is our job to make sure that people and goods arrive wherever they need to go all over the world. Whether or not we succeed in this is something that I've had to test myself today, and I hope you will bear with me for leaving this plenary session briefly to go back to Berlin for an important vote in the parliament. And once that is done, I will be back this evening in Leipzig to continue my participation in this forum. I would like to ask for your understanding and to welcome State Secretary Dr. Stutz in my place this afternoon. In the face of global challenges, the focus of our work in recent years changed considerably. Global crises such as climate change, the COVID-19 pandemic, and geopolitical tensions have exposed weaknesses in transport networks and infrastructures. In Germany, we can see this when it comes to hybrid threats such as cyber attacks against our data infrastructure or the destruction of data and undersea cables. Alongside everyday mobility, the safety and security of our economic system, our supply, and the protection of our infrastructures are moving increasingly into the focus. We know that safety and security depends on the robustness of infrastructure. What is decisive is that we do not only look towards our own transport routes, but also consider cross-border transport and make it safer, securer, and more resilient. And again, international collaboration is key for this. That is why I am grateful to have the ITF as a well-functioning and well-organized international platform for transport issues. It is important to have the Chilean presidency place the focus on resilience for their work during this year. For a couple of weeks now, we've had a new government in Germany, and it is a great honor for me to be the Minister of Transport in this new government. Among other things, we set ourselves the task of strengthening the resilience of our infrastructure by launching a large-scale infrastructure program on all levels of the state. We want to invest heavily. In doing so, we want to make sure our infrastructure is reliable and dependable. These are investments into our future aimed at ending the investment blockade or the bottlenecks in our infrastructure. Many tunnels, bridges, and roads are in need of repair, not only for people in Germany, but also people from neighboring countries who use this infrastructure. We rely on the principle of maintenance instead of new buildings. Against the backdrop of sustainability, enhancing the resilience of supply chains is an important pillar of German transport policy. Because of our geographical position, Germany is a hub for military transports between our allies in NATO and other organizations. We have to make sure that infrastructure, alongside passenger transport and goods transport, is also up to the requirements of military transport in all modes, on rail, on roads, in the air, and on our waterways. What is clear is that we take global risks seriously and we coordinate closely with our international partners. The Federal Ministry of Transport, for example, as part of the G7 group of states, we are part of the working group for resilient transport. Resilience, however, also means consistency. And so it's a good sign to see the ITF family here again with a great number of new initiatives. For 17 years now, ministers and decision makers have been coming here to Leipzig to the summit. And in the transport sector, it is also true that we can achieve more if we work together on an international level, when we exchange our expertise and decide on strategies together for a resilient infrastructure. I'm looking forward to hearing your points of view, hearing from your experience and learning about your challenges and solutions. It has to be our goal to create a global infrastructure that strengthens our economy, secures our freedom, and guarantees our security. I'm looking forward to this collaboration, and I wish all of us an inspiring ITF Summit 2025.
Thank you, Minister Schniede, for your remarks and for your continued support as ITF's host country. Now, to guide us through the vision and priorities of this year's summit, it is my pleasure to welcome the leader of the ITF. Please join me in welcoming the Secretary General of International Transport Forum, Young Tae Kim.
Ministro Muñoz, Señor Bailador Excelente, and Federal Minister Schneider, and Ministers, Excellencies, and friends. I'm honored to welcome you to the International Transport Forum's 2025 Summit. This is the largest event of its kind anywhere in the world. It brings together voices from every continent, across every mode of transport and every sector of our societies. Let me begin by expressing my sincere thanks to our presidency, the Republic of Chile, for its leadership over the last year. We are especially grateful to Minister Muñoz and his team for helping steer our organization through this important moment. Your dedication, clarity, and innovative spirit will leave a lasting mark on the ITF. Our host country, Germany, has once again shown remarkable generosity in supporting the ITF and this summit. Mr. Schneider, Germany's steadfast support has allowed this community to come together and grow together year after year, and for that, we are deeply thankful. We are also grateful for the support of our sponsors, the International Road Transport Union, EIT Urban Mobility, DECRA, and EU Rail, whose gracious contributions support this event and our broader mission to bring a global dialogue on transport to life. More than 1,200 participants, more than 60 high-level representations from ITF member countries and international organizations here this week. And this is an extraordinary gathering of minds, not only in the strength of its numbers, but in the diversity of backgrounds, experiences, and perspectives it brings together. And in our diversity, the message we send is clear and united. Transport matters. It connects people to opportunity. It supports their well-being, and it shapes their futures. And all around the world, the very transport linkages that keep us connected are under strain. Floods, wildfires, pandemics, cyber attacks, and geopolitical disruptions have placed immense pressure on our systems, challenging the ability to anticipate, respond, and adapt. Last year, we spoke of a polycrisis, which is what happens when these disruptions collide and amplify one another. This year, this feels less like a concept and more like the new reality that we are living with. And while we often talk about systems being tested, we should remember it is people who carry the weight of disruption. Companies must find footing in shifting ground, and individuals are doing their best to keep moving forward through uncertain times. This is why resilience must become a guiding principle for how we plan, invest, and make policy decisions. Resilience means designing transport systems that can absorb shocks, adapt to new realities, and continue to serve people when they are needed most. It means identifying vulnerabilities before they become failures and building flexibility into the way we manage infrastructure, supply chains, and services. Above all, it means recognizing that uncertainty is no longer an exception. It is a condition we must be prepared to live and work with. And in that context, gatherings like this one matter more than ever. ITF Summit's offering something rare, a space where experiences, priorities, and perspectives converge from around the world, spanning all corners of society and across all modes of transport. Your presence today speaks to a shared willingness to engage, to listen, and to shape a more resilient future together. It affirms that cooperation has a home here, and then, even in complex times, this community is committed to moving forward. At the ITF, we are conducting a lot of work on resilience via a working group on resilience of transport networks to critical events. The working group aims to develop tools and guidance to help policymakers reduce uncertainty and make transport policies more resilient. The first policy paper from this group is available on the Summit webpage. And just as policy analysis can offer tools for reflection, the Summit offers the space to test and shape new ideas collectively. This is a platform where global perspectives can meet, where knowledge can be challenged and refined, and where we can meet our shared challenges with shared purpose. I cannot wait to see what insights and connections will emerge this year from your formal discussions, bilateral exchanges, and all other moments in between, where our groundwork for resilience turns into momentum. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, the Secretary General. And with that, we are beginning our first session, our first panel of the day. Now, in just 5 years, we've experienced a global pandemic, escalating natural disasters linked to climate change, and intensifying geopolitical tensions. Each of these events have challenged how we move people and how we move goods. And it has also challenged how we build more resilient and sustainable transport systems in response. Today, we're bringing together countries and international institutions that are at the front lines of these challenges. From earthquakes to floods to cyber threats, we'll hear how each country is adapting and how global cooperation, data, and smart design are helping us move forward. So let's please give a very warm welcome to our 7 speakers of this panel. The first one is Juan Carlos Muñoz, Chile's Minister of Transport and Telecommunication. The second is Alenka Bratušek, Slovenia's Minister of Infrastructure. Eugenius Sabutis, Lithuania's Minister of Transport and Communications. Stanislaw Bukovic, Poland's Secretary of State, Government Plenipotentiary for Counteracting Transport Exclusion. We have Lulu Rane, Finland's Minister of Transport and Communications, Tatiana Molden, Executive Secretary at the UNECE. And finally, but definitely not least, to complete this panel, please welcome Mr. Jean Todt, UN Secretary General's Special Envoy for Road Safety. So now that we are all here, why don't we start with Chile, now that I have you right next to me. Okay, I hope you are completely energized after that dance. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Now, Chile experiments around 7,000 seisms each year, and it experiments at least one major earthquake yearly. And even then, remarkably, even after the strongest earthquakes, the transportation systems are up and running within hours. So how does Chile manage to do that?
Thank you. Indeed, Chile is a very seismic country. The largest earthquakes ever recorded was in our country in 1960 with a tsunami following so. And I think one of the main reasons the country resists very well these shocks, on one hand is because we are prepared. We listen to scientists regarding how should we build, how should we structure our networks, what protections do we need, where do we expect that the risks will be higher. So nobody would dare to build a house or a building not following the very strict rules, and we enforce them too. So, and I think that that's something we need to take and apply for climate change. So the question here again is, how do we prepare? How do we listen to scientists? How do we allocate the risks? The problem with climate change is it's much slower. And it's like it's continuous. It's not like in shocks that are visible for everyone. Climate change is less apparent. And that makes it more important to have very, very strong political leadership that can guide us towards taking the right decisions. And second, we have a very good organization to how to react once the disaster has come. We have a service that is in charge of preventing, and the same instrument, organization, is in charge also of acting after disasters have happened. And of course, that triggers a very multi-institutional response. So it's everyone that are called when the cell phone calls and says, you're called to Senapred, and you have to go, and sometimes you don't even know what's going on because the flood has been, or the earthquake or the seismic activity has been sometimes 1,500 kilometers away from where you are. So the system calls, you go to a specific place, all the authorities are there, and we start taking, based on real data, real-time data, the actions that are needed.
So how does that exactly work when you're calling everyone? You have a model of public-private collaboration that has helped Chile respond not only to earthquakes, but also to wildfires. So how does that communication work?
Well, wildfires are more difficult because sometimes they happen in areas where we have no telecommunications available. So very often we have people fighting for fires in areas where we cannot really get to them. So what we're using now, starting to use now, is satellite communication, mostly for text messages. Which are cheaper to provide, but can be really handy to deal with this kind of situations. One thing I think we should also consider is that when a shock happens, we should not only manage the supply of services that are needed for the country to work normally, which are usually significantly damaged, But one thing we need to do, and we seldomly do, at least in Chile, is to control the demand. Like for instance, in those cases, nobody can download a Netflix movie because our telecommunication network is really a very low capacity. So what we're starting to do is to limit what is the kind of communication that you can allow when you really have most of the telecommunication network damage, as it happened in Portugal and Spain like a month ago, and happened in our country like 2 months ago. So this is happening probably more and more often, and we need to be ready.
All right. Now let's bring Slovenia to the table. And Slovenia, you've faced some of the worst floods in its history just 2 years ago. So what did the recent historic floods reveal about the resilience of your transport system? Was it resilient enough?
Thank you very much for these questions. And thank you that I can be here. We are living in very uncertain times. We are facing with wars, even very close to here, climate changes, economic crisis, and I could list more. But today we are talking about resilience of transport and our infrastructure, and so I will share our experience from August 2023, when Slovenia was hit by catastrophic floods, the worst in its history. About 2/3 of Slovenia's territory was affected, and more than 8,000 people had to be evacuated. The final estimate of direct damage amounts to 3 billion euros, and for Slovenia, this is quite big amount. Transport infrastructure was severely damaged, and some remote parts were completely cut off. Almost 2,000 kilometers of roads were damaged. Several important bridges were destroyed. We have established that our highways were resilient enough to sustain the floods. On the other side, we found out the opposite for state and local municipality roads. The government responded immediately and adopted measures to address the consequences of the floods that caused catastrophic devastation. In the initial phase of the intervention, timely public communication has been of key importance. System of daily press conferences was established, as well as special call center for those affected. In my opinion, key factors for our successful response were immediate, immense, and coordinated cooperation amongst local communities, government, public and private sector. Second, activation of huge network of professional and voluntary firefighters, outstanding solidarity between people, which was coordinated through a new mobile application that we have set up. And the application really helped with coordination of 35,000 volunteers. And last but not least, international support and solidarity. And I would like to take this opportunity and once again thank all those countries that provide us with help and support, especially to my German colleague, Minister Schneider. During these floods, Germany, through its Federal Agency for Technical Relief, supported my country by building 2 temporary bridges in our most severely affected region in a very, very short time. So thank you again. What I give biggest importance to is the fact that we have managed to provide connectivity to all parts of Slovenia and in really record time. With that in mind, I can say that our transport system is quite resilient, although there is, of course, always place for improvement. And of course, in all new projects, we start, we should or we have to take into account new flight maps.
New flight maps. So tell us a bit about that. You've already told us the response that you made when all these floods happened and all the international help you got. But what were the key lessons learned? So basically, what would happen if another flood comes up? How would you act differently?
We hope not, but yes, the government has passed 2 laws. First, Emergency Act aimed towards the rapid restoration of infrastructure, the provision of housing for those affected, and swift rehabilitation efforts. And the second was intent for systemic long-term recovery. Ministry of Infrastructure prepared the program to deal with the consequences of direct damage to infrastructure caused by these floods, and the program also focused on increasing the resilience of infrastructure to extreme weather conditions and the challenges of climate changes. Also, we also already did, and we will get money from EU funds, 428 million euros, not only for infrastructure, also for other things. So I can say that one very good example is the before mentioned app that we have developed for coordinating really a huge amount of volunteers.
Okay. Volunteers are definitely key when these types of emergencies come up. So very briefly, before I jump to the other countries, your country really depends on freight transport because it is a key corridor between countries when it comes to transporting goods. But we also know that freight transport consumes very high CO2. So it's basically bad for the environment. So how are you managing the transition to low-emission freight transport while managing your role as a country on the crossroads of key European transport corridors?
Yes, our geographical location is really our great advantage, but this geographical advantage is can feel on our roads. I speak about traffic jams. So our advantage becomes nightmare sometimes for me as the minister responsible for infrastructure. Yeah, Slovenia is at the cross borders 3 European transport corridors: Baltic Sea, Adriatic Sea corridor, Mediterranean corridor, and Western Balkans, Eastern Mediterranean corridor. And that is why our country is heavily burdened by transit traffic, further intensified by the significant role of the port of Koper for hinterland countries. And this places considerable pressure on Slovenia's transport infrastructure. Therefore, it is crucial to modernize our broadened existing transport infrastructure. Slovenia continues to invest in railway infrastructure. This year and next year, really huge amount of money, and because of our geostrategic position, we are under constant pressure to increase the number of permits for freight transport for non-EU countries. And due to environmental reasons and in order to assure fluidity of traffic, we are declining all requests for their increase. We are also investing in sustainable infrastructure to facilitate low-emission transport. This includes modernizing rail networks to electrified rail freight system and introducing eco-friendly technologies in ports, airports, and transport hubs. Slovenia is benefiting also from EU funding mechanism aimed at supporting green transition in transport. But nevertheless, I want to stress that there is no available feasible solution for road transport yet. This is a real challenge for all of us. Some of the questions that our transport companies ask me are: what is the future of road transport? What fuel will be available in 10 years? Which energy infrastructure will support green transition? Which incentives will be available? Which type of vehicles are strategic to buy? And I'm very concerned that these questions don't have clear answer yet.
So where to invest? We're going to be touching on those points later on in this panel. But right now, I want to turn to Finland, Poland, and Lithuania. The three countries are navigating rising geopolitical pressures. And I want to start first with Finland. So, Minister Rane, what are some of the key transport challenges that you're currently facing? Very briefly.
Very briefly, first of all, I have to mention that you know that the geopolitical situation has been much worse since February 2022. And in Finland, the change has been drastic. Our border to Russia, 1,300 kilometers, has been closed since 23. And of course, this has a very big impact on our transport system as a whole. We have also joined NATO. And of course, when you look at the European map and the map of the world also, Finland is the border country of NATO to east and also of Europe, the longest border. Of course, the Finns, we have always been quite prepared. We are not, it's not easy to shock us. And it is important to understand that our transport system as a whole, we have been building it for decades for our country, for our military mobility, and for our everyday life. But now in this situation, when the war is going on and we have new challenges, so the biggest problem, the biggest challenge is how we can build our transport system to be even more secure and the dual use. We have a different rail gauge, not the same as the most of the European countries. And of course, Finland is the Arctic country far up north. And of course, the geopolitical tension will be not easy in the future, I would say. Of course, Finland is a small country, 5.6 million citizens. And we have huge challenges because we have to build our infrastructure to be more resilient. And it has to be kind of, I think that all of us think that the transport systems in our countries must strengthen not only the security of supply and our security, but also our economies. So that's a big thing. And of course, in Finland, 96% of our trade is shipped in or shipped out from Finland. So that's another challenge. And now, of course, we are putting quite a lot of resources on that. But we see that all our countries, we must see the risks, we must be prepared, and of course, it's a long way. Every time we want to build something new on the infrastructure side, it takes time, 5 to 10 years, and we don't always have it.
And cybersecurity is also a big deal for Finland. You are dealing with several cyber threats, well, multiple cyber threats yearly, and you are facing risks to digital and physical transport infrastructure in the Baltic Sea. So what's being done to strengthen that cybersecurity and safeguard that vital infrastructure?
the Baltic Sea, I'm sure that most of you have heard about the cable cracks, the incidents, and of course the interference of GNSS, all this jamming and spoofing. In Finland, I think the backbone of everything is that again, we are quite prepared. Our cybersecurity center is a very high class. I'm very proud of it. Our cybersecurity cooperation between the private sector and the public sector is very good. And of course, the cooperation between the authorities, different sectors, different agencies. And we share information. And we have quite a good common situational picture. And this is the backbone of everything. And of course, we are never happy with the situation. We are struggling to be even better. And cooperation, of course, with other countries, and especially the other countries beside us, all the countries, the Baltic countries, the Nordic countries. But we are never satisfied with the situation, but we are prepared and we are quite happy to be that, but we want to cooperate with all countries more.
Excellent. Now, one final question before I jump to Poland. One on the climate change aspect. One thing that deeply concerns Finland is the fleets that are coming, or the fleets of Russian oil tankers, which evidently pose an imminent environmental risks. So, how are you managing all that?
Again, it's a question of preparedness and cooperation between the authorities. Of course, the risk of environmental accidents, big oil spills and so on, they are increasing all the time. And of course, we are trying to build even a better system where the authorities cooperate and can react. And of course, that when something happens, because we can never be sure that we are safe, then we are fast and experts. And I'm sure that many of you have noticed this Eagle S project we had on the Baltic Sea, and of course the Shadow Fleet is a problem. We are cooperating on many levels, the EU level, the global level, and of course national level, to find solutions so that we can stop and mitigate, of course, the risks.
Excellent. Now, of course, in the Baltic Sea, we also have Poland and we also have Lithuania. So I want to jump to Poland right now, because Poland's transport system has taken serious hits of all sorts. So, Mr. Bukovic, tell us a bit more about your main challenges and how Poland is repositioning its transport systems.
Thank you very much for this question. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for having me in this meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, Poland has been consequently changing its transportation system to respond to the geopolitical challenges and economic challenges resulting, first of all, from Russian aggression over Ukraine. As a country located on the front line and the external border of the European Union, we have become a logistic hub for humanitarian aid and military support, and also for goods transport. Infrastructure has been adjusted to these challenges. The airport in the city of Rzeszów, originally it was a regional airport, and now it is an international transportation hub. Together with this, we have been intensifying investments in the seaports and railways to becoming a transportation hub for Ukraine. Responding to disruptions to global supply chains, Poland's maintained continuity of our investments also in the pandemic and instability of market situations. The volume of actions make us to be the largest construction site of transportation infrastructure in Europe. Every year, we commission about 300-400 kilometers of new express roads and motorways. We also undertake some actions regarding digital resilience, as transport is becoming more and more a victim of cyber attacks on navigation systems, railway systems, and drone systems. So digital security is also very important, and in the condition of hybrid war, you were talking about the Baltic Sea. I have information about another incident with the cable connecting Poland and Sweden. So this is a fact, and this is happening now and here. We are witnessing all this, and Poland has been transforming its transportation system to make it not only efficient, but also resilient to military, digital, and economic crises. And this is the only what can guarantee us safety in the changing Europe.
You, like Slovenia, you also had to manage a lot of flooding. So what lessons stand out, good or bad, from all those floodings?
Absolutely, the flood which affected Poland was not that so dramatic as it was the case with Slovenia, but also our region in southern Poland in September 2024 was strongly affected by flood. And at that time, it helped us to understand how resilient we were and how resilient our transportation infrastructure was. That the floods, which used to be extraordinary, now they are becoming more and more common, and they are becoming an actual threat for our transportation systems. In Poland, our response had two dimensions. It was immediate mobilization of services and army, also engineers and infrastructure managers. It helped us to maintain and reinstate availability of the key roads and continue supplies. Our crisis management system connecting the governmental and the local aspects was efficient, and we also implement new infrastructure management standards. And this is planning of our managing system, and it is one of the integral approach to investments. We change our approach to managing. We also take into consideration the hydrological safety, and this is done every time we design new roads. We also develop retention infrastructure. We build retention tanks to prevent ourselves against floods, and floods are always disasters, but the lessons learned are universal, so we understand these not only as our own experiences, but also as an impulse for further cooperation, international cooperation, to develop sustainable, smart transportation systems.
Thank you. Now, I want to also go to Lithuania, also in the Baltic Sea. Minister Sabutis, could you share some of the major infrastructure efforts that you're currently undergoing in the Baltic Sea?
Thank you. First of all, let me thank you for opportunity being here and talking to this audience. When we're talking about resilience, we are talking about our reaction to something. And the key things that we must be resilient to, they were mentioned a lot of times here by all of the speakers that were speaking here today. And they mentioned pandemics, of course, the war, energy shocks, cyber threats, climate change, and our transport system demand for proactive, systematic, and integrated resilience. And Lithuania has always placed a strong focus on resilient and connected international transport corridors, especially for the corridors, because for us this is not an abstract policy, it is our reality. And we understand the critical importance of secure, multimodal and interoperable infrastructure across the borders. For us, development of corridors relies on success of big international projects that connect several countries. The Baltic countries, we are proud of building the Rail Baltica, and this country that we are in now also connects us by this mega project. Also, we are building and implementing the Via Baltica, it's the road, not railway, the Amber Rail Freight Corridor, which enhances the resilience of north-south transport flows. So, through the border trans-European, through a border of TNT network, those projects will link Baltic Sea, Black Sea, and Aegean Sea. They will provide crucial support to countries in danger, such as Ukraine, by supporting their economies and reconstruction. So therefore, I call everyone to commit to the great challenge of implementing mega projects. With all their risks and challenges, they are key to bringing us closer and crucial to our resilience.
Okay, and how about partnerships? Tell me a bit about, both international and between the public and the private sector. How is this all helping to scale up resilience?
So when we are talking about international projects, of course, they are funding also by the state and by European Union, which we are in, and Lithuania is a proud member of European Union. And so far, Lithuania hasn't got a lot of experience with PPP projects. We have some experience by building roads, but not majors, no great roads. But we are talking with our partners from European Union. I personally, I'm meeting with my colleagues ministers, and we are looking into their perspective, into their experience, how PPP projects are implemented in their countries. And not sometimes, but almost every time when we are talking with them, we're seeing a lot of success. And they're talking that by building bigger projects or mega projects, almost every time you have to invite the businesses, because you need to build big projects. They are in demand of higher fundings. And when we're talking about also about the resilience to the threats, so as dear Minister of Finland said, we don't have a lot of time. So if we are building something alone without the businesses, then we are taking a lot of time to build it. But if we are doing this not alone, by with partnership of private businesses, then we can do it faster. Not so cheaper, but faster.
All right, and what happens when several crises hit at once, like disruptions to transport, energy, and telecommunications, such as what Chile was mentioning before, what happened to Spain and Portugal just a month ago, that everything went blacked out, not just the energy, but also transportation, communication systems, everything.
If I understand correctly, you are asking me how we are reacting to that.
Yeah, how would you react to that? Would you be prepared for something like that?
I have and must answer that we are prepared for that. We are building not only, let's say, governmental structures, new governmental structures. We have the structures that we haven't had, let's say, 5 or 10 years ago. Some of those structures that we're building, we haven't even thought about them 5 or 10 years ago. And now we have our cybersecurity teams that are working, challenging those threats. We have of course, we are not experiencing floods, but when we are thinking, about the regions that can possibly experience floods, then we are talking about how we can implement the projects or the road projects or any other projects that not only resilient to some, let's say, threats, but also to the floods threats. And also, as it was mentioned before, we are also dealing with, some of the cheap ways that you can use SMS text to send to the people, and we are implementing that. Myself, I personally sometimes get those messages from our authorities, and I can honestly say that we rely on them. We are preparing to implement them more and more, and but what happens when all the electricity is gone, let's say due to blackout, or as happened in Lithuania some years ago when some of the regions of our country experienced blackout due to let's say, the bigger storm that we experience. What happens then? So we were not so prepared as we thought that we are prepared for such kind of storm or stronger wind. So we implemented our projects in energy sector, also not only in energy sector, because the main thing that crushed the system were the trees that are growing near our energy system, that cut off the wires when they were torn by the wind. So the first thing that you can do, you can cut some of those dangerous trees. And that's how you became a little more resilient to those threats.
Excellent. Now, we've seen how countries are adapting to national and regional crises. I want to hear now from the UNECE, from Tatiana Moljan here, about how the UN is helping all these countries connect the dots. So what is your organization's, which is UNECE, focus for inland transport in times of crisis?
Well, first of all, I'm thinking, going back to what Minister Muniz and I think you, Madam Minister, also mentioned the importance of regulations, or having the good regulations, once developed with the support of scientific data, with experts, professionals. And I totally agree, and this is exactly what UNECE does, being as the UN main or leading entity for inland transport, to do the regulation, the policies, the frameworks that are needed for the inland transport sector, be it railway, be it road or inland waterways. So this is a key aspect, and it's very important for us that when we bring together member states to agree on a new agreement, on a new regulation, on a new standard, on a new type of fuel, you know, like hydrogen or others, that we have this anticipatory approach, that we look into the future. So it's not just to regulate the immediate needs, but really looking into the future. And that is one of the key contributions that UNECE does to address, let's say, the challenges, is by regulating or providing international agreed standards and rules for the sector. Because transport, but most of all crises, don't know borders. So even though if you have one country with perfect legislation, perfect rules in place, that does not ensure you that you would be safe if something happens, and it might affect also your country. But it's not only about regulation and norms, it's also about the implementation, and this is why at UNECE I'm particularly proud of the work, or the results of the work with concrete tools or platforms that have been put forward. And when I say UNECE, it's not us, it's actually the member states, the academia, the partners that we work with. And I'll give two very concrete examples and one more that was inspired by Minister Sabutis. So we have the UNECE Observatory on Border Crossing Status, which serves really as a practical instrument for crisis management and in response to disruption. So it's exactly border crossing status. That is what it does. And it was, of course, a follow-up to the COVID-19 pandemic. And the second, the International Transport Infrastructure Observatory, which supports exactly anticipatory measures for mapping climate-related hazards. And the third one, PPPs. You've mentioned PPPs, they're critical. I just come back from last week PPP forum in Belgrade, where we discussed with many colleagues of yours, transport in particular, but attracting and the importance of public-private partnerships for the infrastructure in general, but in particular for the transport sector. So we can talk more about good experience there.
Yes, well, you mentioned observatories, you've mentioned mapping tools, and I want to go back to Slovenia, for example, who was saying, I don't know where to invest right now. What is the right decision to do? Where do we put the money on when it comes to being more sustainable, more resilient, more inclusive? So how are these mapping tools helping these countries make better decisions?
On the more strategic decisions on the development of the transport sector, I wouldn't say that this specific tool, the observatories, are key. They are more relevant for anticipating and planning to be, or when we develop infrastructure for being resilient towards different climate change hazards or pandemics or wars, conflict, so to this kind of instruments. And it was very important that, for example, for this Transport Infrastructure Observatory, which has, as I mentioned, this dedicated module that maps, for example, specific climate change hazards to transport, so it modulates. And actually it was inspired by the banking sector, and we included also stress test framework for evaluating the resilience of the transport system. This is very important. I mean, the banking sector has done this after one of the financial crises from 2008. We introduced this now in order to really see how the sector would react, or the concrete project would develop under different stress situations.
Can you elaborate a bit more about that? How do these stress testing frameworks work, and what particular insights have emerged so far?
Well, a stress test in this particular case would be a simulation, or I'd say an analytical exercise designed to evaluate how a system performs subject to specific scenarios. And in this case, building on this concept, we developed this framework to conduct stress tests for transport systems specifically, to assess their resilience, not to financial shocks, but to extreme weather events. So that is the primary scope. But based on this model, it can be extended to other types of stresses or crises, including not only natural disaster, but also geopolitical ones. So this is as a simulation, and it's done, as I've mentioned, the key advantage, this is not that individual by one government, but it's a larger cross-border simulation exercise that can be helpful for governments when taking decision in deciding or building their infrastructure. Not exactly on the type of fuels. For that we need a different kind of discussion.
And finally, very, very briefly, has there been a particular region or partnership that has particularly helped you develop these frameworks?
Well, UNICEF, first of all, is a region that we work, UNICEF, Europe, Central Asia, but also US and Canada, for example, among our memberships. But I would say, and having here also my good colleague Jean told about road safety, so it depends on the sector. If we talk about road sector, of course, road safety, it's of course not only with the UN, but we have countries like Morocco, where we came just now from Marrakesh, or from Chile. So it depends of which specific sector we are talking about. We have in particular applied these practices when it comes to landlocked countries, so countries from Central Asia, many of them being landlocked. And when we talk about corridors, many of you spoke about the development of corridors, so we have to look at this larger corridors that we have. It's not only for Adriatic, Baltic, it's much bigger. We have to look at global corridors. So I would say in a larger, not pan-European, but Asian-European corridors was something that we are trying to look at and to simulate some of the, or anticipate how we should create and develop both the normative, but also the practical infrastructure to have a resilient transport system.
Excellent. Now, of course, these are not one-size-fits-all solutions. These are frameworks so that countries can really get inspired and see how they can adapt it to make better decisions. Now, that said, I want to close with a critical lens on road safety. You mentioned Mr. Gentil, who is sitting over there, and you are the UN Special Envoy for Road Safety. So, Mr. Todd, roads kill over 1 million people a year, and mostly in poor countries. So why isn't road safety more central to the UN's plans for peace and rebuilding economies? So why isn't it a priority there?
Thank you for asking me this question. And to allow me, sorry. Thank you. No, thank you for asking me this question. To participate, incidentally, during the Morocco ministry meeting, which occurred in Marrakesh, which was organized by the Kingdom of Morocco, and I'm happy to thank again the Minister of Transport, my friend Abdesamad Kayou, for hosting this event under the leadership of the King. And it's just one opportunity to speak what I call a silent pandemic. As you mentioned, every year, 1.2 million people die on the roads. About 50 million people are injured with full disability. I mean, to give you an idea, 1.2 million is the population of Marrakesh. Every day, 3,500 people die, 600 among them, 600 kids. And around the table, I was just thinking during everyone talking, I mean, you have been doing a great job in your countries. If I compare at the level of population, for 100,000 population, I mean, the intensity is between 2 days for 100,000 up to 40 days. So can you imagine this discrepancy between high-income countries and low-income countries? So, and I was honored in 2015 to be appointed by the Secretary General. For the first time, he appointed one special envoy for road safety. So some countries have been deciding, and mainly European Union countries have been very drastically changing the situation, because in 50 years, the numbers have been divided by 5, with the number of vehicles which have been multiplied by 3. But unfortunately, as you were rightly mentioning, 10% of the victims are in the developed world, and 90% are in low-income countries. So my mandate is to try to speak with governments, with private sector, with global organization to change that. And from a silent pandemic to make it a vocal pandemic. So that's the challenge, and we have the prescription. You know, contrary to other pandemic, we don't know what to do. Here we know what to do. It's around education, law enforcement, quality of vehicles, quality of roads, quality of post-crash cares. And simple things. Incidentally, it's amongst SDGs 3.6 to divide the number of victims by 2030, and 11.2 to give access to public transportation to any citizen around the world. We're saying simple things like buckling safety belt in the front, in the rear, wearing a proper helmet, speed control, drug and alcohol control, and use of the phone. You will be able to achieve SDG 3.6. So it's just a question of, I mean, trying to make understanding that it is avoidable, and every single citizen has a responsibility to act, because every single citizen in the world is a road user.
Yeah, what you mentioned before about the things you were advocating, for example, the helmets. You're also advocating, for example, for motorcycles to be sold with a couple of helmets already in there. So that's one of the things that you've been doing, right?
Yeah, exactly. And on that, I will show you, because you know the problem with a helmet very often is the price of the helmet and ventilation of the helmet. So we have been able, together with my friend at UN and ECE, to develop one UN standard helmet. Thank you. Like this one, which, as you can see, which is ventilated, and which is below $20. Below $20. And when we were in Morocco, I was talking with my friend, Minister Caillou, and he took the decisions that every motorbike which is going to be sold in Morocco will be sold with helmet, which is absolutely essential. And it's kind of revolution, you know, because very often, I mean, we are talking, but we cannot measure what we do, except with numbers. But accuracy of number is also something complicated. But here, you know, when you buy a car today, you buy a car with safety belts. When you will buy a motorbike, you must buy a motorbike with a helmet. So I know that India is considering that. Some other countries are considering that. But I mean, thank you for Morocco for having been the initiator brave enough to decide something which is new, but which can be a drastic change to diminish the number of victims.
So a perfect example of how a small, simple change can make a really huge difference. So, Mr. Todd, we are close to finishing this panel, so just in a few sentences, in a couple of sentences, you've mentioned the book that you've written, The Silent Pandemic, and you've been all over the world discussing about road safety with so many countries, with so many educational institutions. What are the best and worst practices that you've seen across all the regions that you've visited? In just 2 sentences.
I mean, in fact, it's an interesting question, and I think we, I mean, in the book, and I'm happy to give the book to everybody who wants it, but you have all the figures. But sometimes the figures is not very explicit, so we need to explain, as I was mentioning earlier, number of deaths by 100,000 population. So, I mean, incidentally, I was very impressed because when I spoke with Minister Batusek earlier, I mean, in 4 years, Slovenia has decreased by 2 the number of victims. Now they have 2.1 million population, they have 70 deaths. I mean, I hate to say only because 1 death should not occur. But saying that, I mean, they come in 4 years, they have been from 8 to 3, and I mean the worst, I would say probably in Africa. I was last month I was in Madagascar. In Madagascar, I mean it's simply, it's terrible. It's a tragedy because there is no space for pedestrians, there is no public transportation, there is not a roundabout, there is no traffic light, there is no parking place. And people, I mean, get used to that. And we should not get used to that. And I think we have a big responsibility to give the hand to those people. So those who have been the best should help those who are the worst. And I think that's probably the message I would like to say, because here you have leaders on road safety. But I don't think you should be only happy to have been good in your country. You should try to see, okay, now, how can we give a contribution to those who need help?
Excellent. Now, because time has run out, I just want to ask one last question to the rest of the nations here, but you can only answer it with 1, maximum 2 words. That's the only time that we have left. So for Chile, Slovenia, Finland, Lithuania, and Poland, tell me one concrete action that has made the biggest difference in improving the resilience of your transport system and that other countries could consider adapting in their own context. So, for example, Morocco could be the helmets. So, what is it for you, Chile?
One action.
One action. If you had to decide one, what's the most important one? The first one that comes to mind.
Can I start?
Yeah.
Cooperation between different experts.
Excellent.
I think have a plan.
Have a plan. Finland?
The game called Cyber Citizen.
Cyber Citizen, okay.
Powiedziałbym, że
I would say simultaneous actions, infrastructure, education, and law.
Now, Lithuania?
Okay, I will be a little bit unpopular. First of all, funding and money, and everything that follows after that.
Excellent. So what we've heard today is very unique for each country. And I think we can all really learn from them and to see how we can adapt all those best practices in our own countries. So before we close, I'd like to warmly invite to all of you to the events that follow the session. So please know that right after the opening plenary, we will have the ministers' tours of the exhibition. And at 3:30, please don't miss the session on cybersecurity for transport resilience. There are also a number of side events and presentations at the Open Stage Cafe organized by ITF stakeholders. And finally, be sure to check out the outdoor road safety demonstration by Global NCAP. So see you all there, and thank you so much. A big round of applause.